Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
This is the last Thursday of the Biden administration. Can you tell we're excited for Joe Biden to hit the bricks? The problem is that he's staying in the headlines here all the way to the end, and so we got to keep talking about him in some ways today. Maybe a little optimistically, but in other ways, definitely not optimistically, as we go from the ceasefire deal to his press secretary's final press conference in a really odd way of kind of dissing this press secretary over at the State Department. And then we'll get to Biden's ridiculous farewell speech last night. So, Jim, let's kick it off. Yesterday, the president came out in the White House, flanked by Kamala and Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, saying, yay, we got a ceasefire deal here. We've been working on this for 8 months, and I've been steadfast, and we're going to get this done. Let's, first of all, get a sense of what's in this deal, if it in fact happens. Here's Trey Yingst last night on Fox News with the hostage portion of it.
Now, if approved, 33 hostages, some dead and some alive, would be released in the first phase of this deal. And if the first phase goes forward as planned, by day 16, we are told by an Israeli government official, phase 2 would start to be implemented and ultimately see the remaining hostages released from Gaza. Among that list included Israeli Americans, at least 3 of them that are believed to be alive.
All right, so 33 hostages, 23 believed to be alive. And as far as the actual ceasefire goes, that could potentially, if everybody behaves, big if, could last up to 42 days. Israel would, during that time, largely have to pull out, but the hostilities might continue after that. So, Jim, we're already seeing rumblings that Hamas is getting cold feet here. They've never been really good at honoring these deals in the past. So, good news, potentially, that people who have been in just unimaginable conditions could be coming home soon. But in terms of the situation in the Middle East, I'm not sure much is going to change there in the long term.
Yeah, and for listeners, this is a martini or opening to the program that comes with a caveat. It would not shock me if by the time our listeners get to hear this, the entire deal has fallen apart and everything's reversed and it's big Emily Littell, and never mind. We're going to talk about it as we know it as of this minute or as of this recording, Greg and I. But basically, seemed like there was a last-minute snag. It sounds like Hamas wants to veto, effectively. Israel would have the ability to veto which terrorists get released. There are pretty obvious ones they did not want to release, mass murderers who are symbols of terrorism. And Hamas is like, no, we get to pick which terrorists you guys have to release. And that seems like a fairly big deal. So maybe all of the press conferences and everything that was going on yesterday might be a little premature. This would not be the first time Hamas has indicated they agree to something and then added some sort of last-minute provision that torpedoes the whole thing. Today's Morning Jolt, I had written at length about the numerous times Hamas has broken ceasefires in the past, including since October 7th. There was one which they did a certain amount of prisoner exchange in exchange for some of the hostages, and then there was a shooting in Jerusalem. And, what's supposed to happen in a ceasefire, Greg, is right there in the name, ceasefire. And when you don't do that, the other guys, they're allowed to shoot back. That's how the whole thing works. So, look, those hostages have been in there for 400 some days. It is, they deserve to come home. I can't be completely cynical and grousing and raining on the parade of something that brings home some of those hostages. I believe we have 5 U.S. citizen hostages remaining, if off the top of my head. And so if this gets them home, well, then at least deserves at least a mild round of applause. That said, Hamas has broken every promise they've ever made. They have violated every ceasefire before. It's not really a question of if they will break this ceasefire. It's just a question of when and how many hostages get out before Hamas gets back to its old tricks. And as much as they have been hammered by the Israeli assault over the past year and change, Blinken was saying that Hamas now it's the same level of strength that they've been recruiting as fast as they have been losing guys in this war. It's very hard. Everybody seems to be celebrating, and it seems a little premature for this. If it gets the hostages out, great. But the real problem with this is the character and the nature of Hamas. And the fact that they're not interested in peace. They're interested in ceasefires to rearm and rebuild to go attack again. So why you would think this is going to suddenly change things and why you think there'd be some sort of option beyond effectively destroying Hamas, Nothing else is going to work in the long run. So, hopefully we get these hostages home. Hopefully things are, great. But it was not exactly shocking to see a whole bunch of people spiking the football before they're having a Leon Lett moment. It seems, for people who have long memories and remember the dangers of premature celebration. Although maybe I should say a Malachi Corley moment, considering how the Jets did earlier this year, spiking the football on the 1 yard line.
I've never understood why people think it's cool to drop it right at the goal line when you can run that risk. That's a whole other argument at the time. But yes, it's going to be interesting to see if Hamas can hold up its end of the bargain. Hopefully we at least get all of the hostages back before they renege on this, because that's obviously going to be a huge moment of relief for those families. Again, cannot even imagine what these people have been through. God bless them if we can get them home safe and sound here in the next few days. All right, Jim. At the same time, the Biden administration was kind of doing the victory lap that you mentioned. Donald Trump on Truth Social was saying, hey, we got this deal done. And so some people were rolling their eyes thinking, hey, you're not in the office yet. What are you doing? I know you said you got to give the hostages back or there's going to be hell to pay and all that sort of thing. But honestly, but no, the Trump incoming administration and the Biden outgoing administration have actually been working together on this. And Matthew Miller, the State Department spokesman, was talking about this yesterday as the announcement of the ceasefire deal, at least we thought so, was emerging. And here's a couple of quick clips from Matthew Miller talking about how good it was to have the Trump team on board.
When it comes to the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line.
Absolutely critical. Then he said this.
I don't know if it's unprecedented to have envoys from an outgoing and an incoming administration sitting at the same table negotiating a ceasefire agreement of this kind. But if it's not unprecedented, it's certainly unusual. And we, of course, thank the Trump team for working with this on this ceasefire agreement. We think it's important that they were at the table.
So that's good. And you got to give the Biden administration kudos, saying, look, this is the incoming administration, whether we like it or not. This issue is going to be going on long after we're gone. We need to work together on this, if at all possible. And it looks like they have been. We certainly haven't heard about things blowing up between the two sides. But then Miller's comments get brought up at the final White House briefing for Karine Jean-Pierre. And she's like, man, who are we talking about here?
Karine, we're sort of dancing around who gets to take credit for this deal.
No one's dancing around here.
Our colleague at the State Department briefed our colleagues that President Trump was critical in getting this deal over the line. Do you not agree with that statement?
I mean, look, I'm not going to speak to a random person. I don't know who this person is. I'm not going to. Oh. What I can say is, look, obviously Matt Miller will speak for himself. What I can say is there are steps that we're taking here that is really important and critical, and that started with this president starting a framework that was agreed upon by the world back in May.
Your colleague at the State Department. That should have been a clue. Then she calls it a random person and apparently speaks for himself, not Tony Blinken or the State Department or the administration, which I kind of thought was his job as well. So, Jim, what do you make of that little infighting on the way out the door?
So it's not easy for conservatives to find individuals in the Biden administration who they think have done a good job. I might nominate Matthew Miller as the MVP of the Biden administration. Compared to everybody else, he seems to call it straight. I went back, I read some of the statements he'd made about Hamas. He basically called them out for their barbarism, for executing hostages when they were at risk of being rescued by the IDF. I think he's about as good as you're going to find in this administration. And maybe it's a little bit easier when you're speaking for the State Department and you get to say things that are denunciations of terrorist groups and get into Diplo speak nicely of all of our allies and things like that. But I think his point there, like it's not just gracious and appropriate. It's accurate. There is no point in the Biden administration making promises that the Trump administration is not going to accept or keep. And so it's just a statement of fact that they had to be operating on the same page here. Everything changes on January 20th. So they had to work hand in hand, and it sounds like it worked just fine. And so, look, you and I, we do football jokes on this podcast quite a bit. We've all heard Coach speak. And this is exactly the moment where, Karine Jean-Pierre, the State Department said that Trump deserves credit for this. the right answer. This was a team effort, and everybody had to pull their weight, and we're just thankful to everybody contributed, and we all got to do our jobs out there. We've seen that you kind of compliment everybody else without getting too specific or giving one person more credit than the other, and you just kind of happy talk, right? That's all she had to do, and she couldn't do it, and it came across, I think, as petty. I think this is her last briefing at the White House, and she kind of had this very teary-eyed farewell, not on the part of the White House reporters who were like, we still have a bunch of questions you haven't answered. There was a report, Kirby was not there. There was reports that she had not wanted him there. I understand there's a bit of a rivalry there, and you'd think Kirby would be talking about something like the hostage release, but he was not there. That's a report a rumor going around Washington. I think the fact that she has seen his presence as kind of an imposition on her traditional role as White House press secretary, I think is pretty self-evident there. It doesn't look good for the White House press secretary to refer to the State Department spokesman as a random person and to kind of be dismissive. It comes across as, look, when we had Dana Perino on as one of the rare guests of this program, she pointed out that, Karine Jean-Pierre did not have much of a pre-existing relationship with Biden. And so she's kind of thrown into a tough job. It's a question of how much access does she actually get to Biden to ask him questions that the press corps is asking. But she's really not good at this. And I think today is a good, yesterday's briefing was a very good example of that. And I just, they just step on rakes all the time. It would not have taken much to say, we're thankful for everybody who helped contribute. And that includes the Trump team. And instead she has to, oh, no, act like it's ridiculous and Trump is trying to jump in and claim credit that he doesn't deserve.
So if Matt Miller's the MVP, what does that make Karine Jean-Pierre in this administration?
End of the season cuts. Not even on the practice squad. Not even, there's not even development there. My assumption is that she's on her way to, an MSNBC gig at some point.
Probably. Yeah. Well, that's where her predecessor went. So I'm sure there's a chair.
That's the Arena League for Democratic Party officials. Or, what is it? UFL or whatever the former XFL group is,
Well, as Joe Biden's administration fades away and Karine Jean-Pierre's time at the podium fades away, I'll tell you what's not fading away. Artificial intelligence. It's not only coming, it's here. And even if you think it's a bit overhyped, it's everywhere. Self-driving cars, molecular medicine, business efficiency. And if it's not in your industry yet, it is coming and it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? The answer is to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is a blazing fast and secure platform for all of your infrastructure, database, and application development needs, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for computing and 80% less for networking, so you'll be saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI.
Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. Offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini.
Not only does Trump need an eraser, he needs a lot of them. The Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski. Every day, Chris helps unpack the connection between politics and the economy and how it affects your wallet. From banning gas water heaters and banning areas for drilling oil, Biden's claims for a smooth transition were nonsensical. Trump needs to start from scratch. Whether it's happening in D.C. or down on Wall Street, it's affecting you financially. Be informed. Check out the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, well, let's talk about Joe Biden's farewell address. As I was mentioning to Jim before we started recording today, until about 5 minutes before it started, I had totally forgotten that he was planning to give his farewell address. I was talking to my brother, and he's like, yeah, that's coming up in a few minutes. I'm like, oh, all right. And so I sat there and watched it. And of course, he claimed, he's taking credit for all these supposedly amazing accomplishments, despite the fact that his disapproval numbers are in the 60s as he heads out of office, nearly doubling up his approval rating. But we'll leave that aside for now for the insanity of the rest of his address, part of which included like things he didn't get done, but was still pushing for, like somehow that's going to happen in the last 3 days. But instead, he decided to try to be, I guess, like Dwight Eisenhower with his military-industrial complex speech by sending out warnings about grave concerns he has. And here's what he's gravely concerned about.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. The dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead.
He didn't mention the oligarchs, but it's pretty obvious who he's talking about when he went into misinformation.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
That's always our democracies at stake. Jim, he loved the oligarchs until some of them weren't his supporters. It's amazing how that works.
Well, first of all, Greg, did I hear the president correctly that editors are disappearing? Editors?
You're trying to say editors? I don't know what that was supposed to be.
I believe that was what they were. That was in the text. Editors. Now, how can you make fun of an old man with a stutter? That's not a stutter. That's mumbling. And he's been doing this the entirety of his presidency. And it's one of the reasons he's not a particularly effective communicator. People who have listened to this podcast can probably find lots of examples in which I have not been as clear as I ought to have been. But when you're president of the United States, reading off a teleprompter, squinting, which, by the way, you start wondering how the president's vision is. Errors. Well, first of all, the speech could have used an error a little bit there. But the oligarch comment, first of all, you can see in there the subtext of all the whining, And if he does want to say that there are powerful forces who are trying to take away democracy and take away the elected leaders of this country, I just assume he's talking about Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
And all the other Democrats who apparently strong-armed him into not running for another term. But the other thing was oligarchs are this terrible danger. I looked it up. Greg, it was 12 days ago that he gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to George Soros.
Uh-huh.
Right? George Soros, who has, I've looked up the number, so he's got a net worth of $7 billion, so definitely counts as one of those super wealthy types. Since the year 2000, this was a study was completed in 2023, he had donated nearly $21 billion to left-wing causes, organizations, and candidates, not just the United States, all around the world. Open Society Institute is like a one of those money machines, or throwing around cash like a rapper at a strip club, right? I mean, that just is money going everywhere. But that money is okay. That's clearly not an oligarch trying to buy. Never mind the fact that he elected a whole bunch of prosecutors who didn't believe in prosecuting crimes and put together no cash bail, put all kinds of violent criminals back on the streets. That's not a problem. That's not an oligarch. But Elon Musk, buys Twitter and allows people to, that's the end of it. And they take away the errors. The errors. People might think this is kind of mean, but you know what? Biden has lasted beyond his welcome. We're not getting an end of the presidency press conference. I guess, since withdrawing from the race, he never had a press conference, did he?
Not a formal one, no.
Right? I mean, occasionally the shouted question on his way to Marine One or something like that. But, he could. And why did he not do it? Because he couldn't. And because he mumbles and because he can't handle this. And when he picked a exit interview, he picked Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC. In a way, if you're Lawrence O'Donnell, isn't there a little bit of an insult in that selection? Isn't that basically saying, this is the guy who we trust will not ask a hard question no matter what? This is basically the White House declaring we consider Lawrence O'Donnell to be slow pitch softball, T-ball, right? Just putting it up there. Give it a swing, Mr. President. Good luck. And so, this presidency can't end soon enough. He leaves Monday, right? So really, tomorrow,
4 days.
TGIF. And you think about it, just like it's Fairfax County Public Schools, it's really just a half day.
The bitterness, the pettiness, he's basically blame casting for the reason why he's not getting another 4 years here. I don't remember him ever endorsing legislation to ban members of Congress from making stock trades. That's clearly a shot at Nancy Pelosi. And so I think that's actually a good policy, by the way. But it's never his fault. There's never disappointment because he didn't get the job done. There's always something else is the reason. He's awesome. Everything he's done is awesome. And if you don't appreciate it, you're just not grateful enough. And so,
this was the guy who Democrats selected to correct for all the excesses of the Trump years. Narcissistic, elderly egomaniac who runs around thinking he's terrific, never admits a mistake. It's already somebody else's fault. Yeah, it's a great change. That's totally different. Wow, you really showed a sharp contrast with that one. Way to go, Democrats.
Yeah, the thought that just kept going through my head last night over and over again is Joe Biden's not the shortest president we've ever had, but he might be the smallest.
Oh, very good. I was waiting for you to say that he's stooping, but he's, he's shuffling off into the sunset.
Right. Amazing. All right. What do we have? Less than 4 days. Good. Jim, see you tomorrow.
96 hours, America. Good luck. See you tomorrow.
We can do this, I think. Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos, Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Not only on your favorite podcast platform, but also subscribe on YouTube. Would love to have you there as well. Also, thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Thursday. Join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.